The Discovery. The red dwarf star cast an eerie crimson glow across the barren landscape of Proxima Centauri B. Dr. Ilara Voss squinted through her helmet's visor, the alien world's ruddy hues a stark contrast to the blue-green orb of Earth she'd left behind. Her breath fogged the inside of her helmet as she exhaled slowly, trying to calm her racing heart. "Base camp, this is Voss. I'm approaching the anomaly now," she reported, her voice barely above a whisper. The comm crackled with static before a response came through. "Copy that, Voss. Proceed with caution. Remember, we're making history here." Ilara rolled her eyes, as if she needed reminding. She was about to become the first human to make contact with definitive proof of alien intelligence. The anomaly, as they'd been calling it, was a structure of clearly artificial origin, half buried in the rusty soil of humanity's nearest exoplanet neighbor. As she crested a low ridge, the anomaly came into view. Ilara's breath caught in her throat. No amount of grainy satellite imagery could have prepared her for the reality of what stood before her. A towering obelisk of obsidian-like material rose from the ground, its surface etched with swirling patterns that seemed to shift and change as she watched. It was beautiful, terrifying, and utterly alien. Ilara approached slowly, her handheld scanner beeping softly as it collected data. The obelisk stood at least 30 meters tall, its base disappearing into the rocky soil. As she drew closer, she noticed a faint humming emanating from the structure, felt more through her suit than heard. "Base camp, are you seeing this?" she asked, her voice filled with awe. "Affirmative, boss. Your suit cam is transmitting clearly. It's incredible." Ilara reached out a gloved hand, hesitating just centimeters from the obelisk's surface. The humming intensified, and she could have sworn the patterns etched into the material began to glow faintly. "I'm going to attempt physical contact," she announced, her scientific curiosity overriding her caution. "Voss, wait." The voice from base camp began, but Ilara had already pressed her palm against the obelisk. The world exploded into light and sound. Ilara felt as if her mind was being stretched across the vastness of space, filled with knowledge and images she couldn't begin to comprehend. She saw worlds beyond imagining, civilizations rising and falling, and a darkness spreading across the galaxy like a cancer. As suddenly as it began, the vision ended. Ilara found herself on her knees, gasping for breath. The obelisk pulsed with energy, the patterns on its surface now unmistakably glowing. "Voss, Voss, do you copy?" The frantic voice from base camp finally broke through the ringing in her ears. "I'm here," she managed, her voice shaky. "Something's happening." The obelisk, it's... Before she could finish her sentence, a beam of intense light shot from the top of the structure, piercing the thin atmosphere of Proxima Centauri and disappearing into space. Ilara staggered to her feet, watching in amazement as the light faded, leaving behind a shimmering distortion in the air above the obelisk. "Base camp, are you seeing this?" she asked, her scientific mind already racing to explain what she was witnessing. "Affirmative, Voss. We're picking up massive energy readings. Whatever that beam was, it's broadcasting something into deep space." Ilara's excitement was tinged with a creeping sense of unease. Had they just inadvertently announced humanity's presence to the galaxy at large? And if so, who, or what, might answer? She didn't have to wait long for an answer. Within minutes, alarms blared from her suit, and the comm channel erupted with panicked voices from base camp. "Multiple objects detected entering the system at high velocity," someone shouted. "They're decelerating. My God, they're heading straight for Proxima Centauri." Ilara's eyes widened as she saw them. Sleek, silver ships descending through the planet's thin atmosphere with impossible grace. They were massive, easily dwarfing anything humanity had ever constructed in space. As they approached, Ilara felt a mixture of terror and exhilaration. This was it. First contact. The largest of the ships came to a hover directly above the obelisk. A beam of light, similar to the one the obelisk had emitted but blue in color, shot down from the ship. When it faded, 3 figures stood before Ilara. They were tall, easily 7 feet in height, with slender bodies covered in iridescent scales. Their heads were elongated, with large, multifaceted eyes that reminded Ilara of a dragonfly's. They had no visible mouth, but when the central figure spoke, Ilara heard the words clearly in her mind. "We are the Zarkali," the alien said, its mental voice carrying an undertone of surprise and curiosity. "We had not expected to find intelligent life in this system. Your activation of the beacon was unexpected." Ilara swallowed hard, acutely aware that she was about to become the first human to speak to an alien species. She straightened her posture, trying to project confidence despite her racing heart. "I am Dr. Ilara Voss of Earth," she said, her voice steady despite her nerves. "We are a peaceful species, seeking knowledge and understanding of the universe." The Zarkali regarded her silently for a moment before responding. "Your species is young, yet you have already reached beyond your cradle. Impressive, but perhaps reckless. The beacon you activated is not a toy, Dr. Ilara Voss of Earth. It is a warning and a call to arms." Ilara frowned, a chill running down her spine. "A warning? Against what?" The alien's multifaceted eyes seemed to darken. "Against the greatest threat our galaxy has ever known. A threat that has devoured countless civilizations, that even now creeps ever closer to your corner of the spiral arm." The other 2 Zarkali moved forward, manipulating holographic displays that sprang to life between them. Ilara gasped as she saw images of entire worlds being consumed by what looked like a swarm of metallic insects. "We call them the Harvesters," the lead Zarkali explained. "They are a hive mind species that seeks only to consume and expand. They do not negotiate. They do not show mercy. They simply devour." Ilara's mind reeled with the implications. Humanity had only just taken its first steps into interstellar space, and now they were being told that a threat of unimaginable proportions loomed on the horizon. "Why are you telling me this?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. The Zarkali's mental voice took on a tone that Ilara could only interpret as grim determination. "Because, Dr. Ilara Voss of Earth, by activating the beacon, your species has joined the fight. The Harvesters will have detected its activation. They will come." Ilara felt the weight of this knowledge settle on her shoulders. In her quest for discovery, she had inadvertently placed her entire species in the crosshairs of a cosmic war. What can we do?" she asked, her scientific curiosity warring with a very human fear. The lead Zarkali stepped forward, extending a hand in a gesture that was surprisingly human-like. "We can stand together. Your species has shown remarkable adaptability and ingenuity. Combined with our technology and the gifts of the beacon, we may yet have a chance to turn the tide." Ilara looked at the offered hand, then back at the obelisk, the beacon that had started it all. In that moment, she knew that everything would change. Humanity's petty conflicts and earthbound concerns would soon be dwarfed by a threat beyond imagination. But with that threat came an opportunity to reach for the stars, to forge alliances with beings they had only dreamed of, and perhaps to save not just their world, but countless others. With a deep breath, Ilara reached out and clasped the Zarkali's hand. "On behalf of Earth," she said, her voice growing stronger with each word, "I accept your offer of alliance. Whatever comes, we'll face it together." As their hands met, the beacon pulsed once more, as if in acknowledgement of this pivotal moment. Humanity had taken its first real step into a larger universe, for better or worse. The age of Earth's isolation was over. The true test of human resilience and ingenuity was about to begin. The Alliance. The next few weeks passed in a blur for Dr. Ilara Voss. The arrival of the Zarkali had thrown Earth into a frenzy of activity, fear, and excitement. World leaders scrambled to form a united front, while the scientific community worked around the clock to understand the wealth of knowledge the aliens had brought with them. Ilara found herself at the center of it all, acting as a liaison between humanity and their new alien allies. She stood now in a vast underground complex hastily constructed beneath the New Mexico desert, watching as human and Zarkili scientists worked side by side. "It's remarkable how quickly your species adapts," came the now familiar mental voice of Zithara, the lead Zarkili scientist. "Many races we've encountered take years to accept our presence, let alone work alongside us." Ilara smiled wryly. Necessity is a powerful motivator. The threat of annihilation tends to push petty differences aside. Zithara's multifaceted eyes shimmered in what Ilara had come to recognize as amusement. "Indeed. Come, there's something we need to discuss." They made their way to a secure briefing room, where holographic displays flickered to life, showing star charts and complex schematics. Ilara's breath caught as she recognized one particular design. "Is that a ship?" she asked, her voice filled with awe. Zithara nodded, an oddly human gesture they had adopted. "This is the Void Breaker. It represents the pinnacle of our technology, combined with the knowledge gleaned from the beacon you activated." Ilara studied the schematics, her mind racing to understand the principles behind its design. The ship was unlike anything she had ever seen, its hull composed of a material that seemed to bend light around it. "It's beautiful," she breathed. "But why are you showing me this?" Zithara's mental voice took on a grave tone. "Because, Dr. Voss, you will be joining its crew. The Void Breaker represents our best hope against the Harvesters. It can traverse vast distances through subspace, effectively breaking through the void between stars. But more importantly, it carries weapons capable of disrupting the Harvester's hive mind." Ilara's eyes widened. "Me? But I'm not a soldier or a ship's captain. I'm a xenorchaeologist." "Precisely," Zithara replied. "Your unique perspective, your ability to understand and interpret alien artifacts like the beacon, makes you invaluable. The Void Breaker's mission will take us to the fringes of known space, searching for more beacons and the civilizations that created them. We need your expertise." Before Ilara could respond, alarms blared throughout the complex. Red lights flashed as a voice came over the intercom. "All personnel to battle stations. This is not a drill. Repeat, this is not a drill." Zithara's eyes darkened. "They're here, sooner than we anticipated." Ilara felt her heart race as she followed Zithara to the command center. Screens showed a terrifying sight. A swarm of metallic insect-like ships descending on Earth's orbital defenses. "The Harvesters," Ilara whispered. General Thaddeus Armstrong, the grizzled veteran in charge of Earth's unified defense force, turned to them as they entered. "Your warning came just in time," he growled to Zithara. "But I'm not sure it'll be enough. Those things are tearing through our satellites like tissue paper." Zithara moved to a console, interfacing directly with it through some unseen technology. "We're deploying our ships to reinforce your defenses, but we need more time. The Void Breaker isn't ready for launch." Ilara watched in horror as the battle unfolded in Earth's orbit. Human ingenuity clashed with alien tenacity as fighters darted between the larger capital ships. The Zarkili vessels, sleek and powerful, turned the tide wherever they appeared, but there were too few of them to be everywhere at once. "We need a plan," Ilara said, her scientific mind kicking into overdrive. "General, what if we could disrupt their coordination?" Armstrong raised an eyebrow. "What do you have in mind, Doctor?" Ilara pointed to the Harvester ships on the main screen. "Look at their movement patterns. They're too perfect, too coordinated. It has to be some form of hive mind. If we could introduce chaos into their system." Zithara's eyes brightened. "The beacon. Its energy signature might be able to interfere with their neural network." "But the beacon is on Proxima Centauri," Armstrong objected. "How the hell do we get its signal here?" Ilara's mind raced. "We don't need to. We just need to recreate its energy signature. Zithara, could we modify one of your ships to emit a similar frequency?" The alien scientist was silent for a moment, interfacing with the ship's systems. It's possible, but it would require precise calibration, and whoever pilots the ship would be flying directly into the heart of the harvester swarm. "I'll do it," came a voice from behind them. Ilara turned to see Captain Maya Chen, one of Earth's top combat pilots. "Just tell me where to fly." What followed was a frenzy of activity as Zithara and human engineers worked to modify Chen's fighter. Ilara found herself in the thick of it, her knowledge of the beacon proving crucial in replicating its unique energy signature. As they worked, the battle raged on above. Earth's defenses were faltering, and even the advanced Zarkali ships were taking heavy losses. Time was running out. Finally, after what seemed like an eternity, Chen's modified fighter was ready. As the captain climbed into the cockpit, Ilara grabbed her arm. "Good luck," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "And thank you." Chen gave her a grim smile. "Just doing my job, Doc. You eggheads do yours, and we'll call it even." As the fighter launched, all eyes in the command center turned to the main screen. Chen's ship streaked towards the heart of the harvester swarm, dodging and weaving through a hail of enemy fire. "Energy signature is powering up," Zithara reported. "It's working. The harvesters are starting to show signs of disorientation." On the screen, the perfectly coordinated movements of the harvester ships began to falter. Some collided with each other, while others fired wildly into space. "All ships, this is General Armstrong," the gruff commander barked into the comm. "The enemy is in disarray. Press the attack. Push those bastards back." The tide of battle shifted dramatically. Without their hive-mind coordination, the harvesters were no match for the combined might of humanity and the Zarkali. Ship after ship fell to the onslaught. But victory came at a cost. As the last of the harvester ships retreated or were destroyed, a solemn silence fell over the command center. Captain Chen's fighter, its energy signature still blazing, had been caught in the crossfire. There was no sign of ejection. In the days that followed, Earth celebrated its narrow victory while mourning its losses. The alliance between humanity and the Zarkali, forged in the heat of battle, grew stronger. But Ilara knew this was only the beginning. As she stood before the nearly completed void breaker, its sleek hull gleaming under the artificial lights of the underground hangar, Ilara felt the weight of responsibility settle on her shoulders. "It's almost ready," Zithara said, coming to stand beside her. "We'll be launching within the week." Ilara nodded, her eyes fixed on the ship that represented humanity's best hope. "The harvesters will be back, won't they? And in greater numbers." "Yes," the alien scientist confirmed. "This was merely a scouting force. But thanks to Captain Chen's sacrifice, we've bought ourselves time and gained valuable intelligence about their weaknesses." Ilara turned to her alien friend, determination blazing in her eyes. "Then we better make the most of it. There are more beacons out there, more allies to find. And somewhere, there has to be a way to stop the harvesters for good." Zithara placed a hand on Ilara's shoulder, the gesture now familiar and comforting. "Together, Dr. Voss, we'll face this threat together." As they stood there, human and alien united in purpose, the void breaker loomed before them, a symbol of hope, of cooperation, and of the indomitable spirit that would carry them into the unknown. The true test still lay ahead, but for the first time since the harvesters appeared, Ilara felt a glimmer of hope. The alliance had held. Now it was time to take the fight to the stars. The Crucible. The void breaker hung in Earth's orbit like a sliver of midnight against the blue-green marble of humanity's home. Dr. Ilara Voss stood on the observation deck, her heart racing with a mixture of excitement and trepidation. After months of preparation, they were finally ready to embark on their mission. "Quite a sight, isn't it?" a gruff voice said behind her. Ilara turned to see Admiral Katerina Volkov, the newly appointed human commander of the joint mission. Ilara nodded, a small smile playing on her lips. "It still doesn't feel real sometimes. A year ago, I was digging up pottery shards on distant exoplanets. Now, she gestured to the sleek ship before them. Volkov's weathered face softened slightly. Now you're our best hope of finding a way to stop the harvesters. Are you ready for this, Doctor? Before Ilara could respond, the ship-wide intercom crackled to life. All crew to your stations. Prepare for departure in T-minus 30 minutes. As they made their way to the bridge, Ilara marveled at the seamless integration of human and Zarkili technology. The corridors hummed with an energy that seemed to pulse in tune with her own quickening heartbeat. The bridge was a hive of activity when they arrived. Zith-Era stood at the central console, its multifaceted eyes reflecting the myriad of holographic displays surrounding it. Status report. Volkov barked as she took her place in the command chair. All systems are green, Zith-Era reported, its mental voice calm and steady. The void drive is primed and ready. We await your command, Admiral. Volkov nodded, her steely gaze sweeping across the bridge crew. A mix of Earth's finest and Zarkili experts. Let's make history, people. Engage the void drive. Ilara gripped the railing of her station as a low hum built throughout the ship. The stars on the view screen began to stretch, and then, with a flash of impossible colors, they were gone. The void breaker had lived up to its name, tearing a hole through the very fabric of space-time. Ilara's scientific mind reeled at the implications, even as her body adjusted to the strange sensation of void travel. Transit successful, Zith-Era announced. We've arrived at our first target, the beacon in the Sirius system. As the ship reverted to normal space, alarms suddenly blared across the bridge. The tactical officer, Lieutenant Ravi Patel, shouted over the din. Multiple contacts. Harvester ships incoming. Volkov's face hardened. Battle stations. Evasive maneuvers. The void breaker danced through space, its advanced propulsion systems allowing it to move in ways that defied conventional physics. But the harvesters were relentless, their swarm tactics pushing the ship and its crew to their limits. We can't keep this up forever, Volkov growled. We need a plan. Ilara's mind raced, recalling the schematics she'd studied so diligently. The void drive, she said suddenly. We can use it as a weapon. Zith-Era's eyes brightened in understanding. Of course, a controlled void rupture could disrupt their neural network, similar to what we did at Earth. Do it, Volkov ordered without hesitation. What followed was a daring maneuver that would have been impossible with any other ship. The void breaker plunged into the heart of the harvester swarm, its void drive spooling up to maximum power. Now, Ilara shouted, and Zith-Era activated the drive. Space itself seemed to scream as a rift opened in the midst of the harvester fleet. Ships were torn apart by the gravitational forces, while others spiraled out of control, their hive mind connection shattered by the dimensional distortion. As quickly as it began, it was over. The void breaker emerged on the other side of the rift, battered but intact. The remaining harvester ships, now uncoordinated and confused, fell easy prey to the advanced weapons of the Earth-Zarkili alliance. In the aftermath of the battle, as repair crews worked to patch up the damage, Ilara found herself in the ship's laboratory, poring over data from the Sirius beacon. You should rest, Zith-Era said, entering the lab. That was an impressive bit of thinking out there. Ilara shook her head, her eyes never leaving the holographic display. No time. Look at this. The beacon's energy signature changed during our battle. It's like it was responding to our presence. Zith-Era leaned in, its alien features creased in concentration. Fascinating. It's almost as if. The ship rocked violently, cutting off Zith-Era's words. Red alert klaxons wailed as Volkov's voice came over the intercom. All hands, brace for impact. We're under attack. Ilara and Zith-Era raced to the bridge, arriving just in time to see a massive harvester mothership emerge from void space. How did they find us so quickly? Volkov demanded, her knuckles white, as she gripped the arms of her command chair. The beacon, Ilara realized with dawning horror. They must be able to track its energy signature. We led them right to it. The situation looked grim. The Voidbreaker, still recovering from its previous battle, was no match for the firepower of the Harvester mothership. Shield after shield fell as the relentless assault continued. "We need options, people," Volkov shouted over the sound of exploding consoles and creaking metal. Ilara's mind raced, connecting dots that had eluded her before. The beacon's response, the Harvester's ability to track it, the very nature of the void drive itself. "The beacon isn't just a warning system," she said, her voice rising with excitement despite the dire situation. "It's a key to the very network the Harvesters use to communicate." Cythera's eyes widened in understanding. "If we can interface with the beacon, use our void drive to amplify its signal, we could shut down every Harvester ship in the sector," Ilara finished. Volkov didn't hesitate. "Do it. Whatever you need, you've got it." What followed was a desperate race against time. As the Voidbreaker's structural integrity reached critical levels, Ilara and Cythera worked feverishly to modify the ship's systems. They were attempting to do in minutes what should have taken months of careful research and preparation. "Hull breach on Deck 7, Patel reported, his voice strained. "We can't take much more of this." "Almost there," Ilara muttered, her fingers flying over the holographic interface. With a final keystroke, she looked up at Volkov. "It's ready. But Admiral, this could just as easily destroy us as save us. The energies we're dealing with, they're beyond anything we've encountered before." Volkov met Ilara's gaze, a grim smile on her face. "The needs of the many, Doctor. Do it." Ilara nodded, and with a deep breath, activated the modified void drive. The effect was immediate and overwhelming. A wave of energy, visible as a ripple in the very fabric of space-time, exploded outward from the Voidbreaker. It washed over the Harvester mothership, and for a moment, nothing seemed to happen. Then, like a puppet with its strings cut, the massive vessel went dark. Smaller Harvester ships began to drift aimlessly, their coordinated attack disintegrating into chaos. On the bridge of the Voidbreaker, consoles sparked and systems failed as the ship struggled to contain the enormous energies it had channeled. Ilara felt a moment of vertigo, as if she was simultaneously everywhere and nowhere in the universe. And then, as suddenly as it began, it was over. In the eerie silence that followed, Volkov's voice cut through the smoke-filled air of the bridge. "Status report. Harvester fleet neutralized," Paddle reported, his voice filled with disbelief. They're just floating out there, dead in space." "The beacon?" Ilara asked, stumbling to her feet. Cythera interfaced with what remained of the ship's sensors. Its energy signature has changed again. It's quiescent now, as if it's gone into some kind of dormant state. As the crew of the Voidbreaker began to assess the damage and the full implications of what they'd accomplished, Ilara felt a mix of elation and dread. They had won a significant victory against the Harvesters, but at what cost? And what new challenges would this discovery bring? The Sirius system, once a battlefield, was now a graveyard of Harvester ships and a testament to the power of cooperation between species. But Ilara knew this was just the beginning. There were more beacons out there, more secrets to uncover, and an entire galaxy that now looked to the unlikely alliance of humanity and the Zarkuli for salvation. As repair crews swarmed through the battered Voidbreaker and plans were made to study the derelict Harvester vessels, Ilara stood at the viewport, gazing out at the stars. They had passed through the crucible and emerged victorious. But the true test still lay ahead. The legacy of the Voidbreaker and of the alliance it represented was only beginning to unfold. The sacrifice. The Voidbreaker limped through space, its once gleaming hull now scarred and pitted from countless battles. Dr. Ilara Voss stood on the bridge, her eyes fixed on the swirling vortex of a nearby nebula. In the months since their victory at Sirius, they had pushed deeper into uncharted space, activating beacons and rallying alien races to their cause. But the cost had been high. too high. Dr. Voss, Admiral Volkov's voice cut through her reverie. The War Council is assembling. We need you there. Ilara nodded, falling into step beside the Admiral as they made their way to the conference room. The corridors were quieter now, the crew's initial excitement replaced by a grim determination. As they entered, Ilara was struck by the diversity of the beings gathered around the holographic display. Representatives from a dozen alien races, all united against the Harvester threat. At the center stood Zithera, its iridescent scales dulled with fatigue. The situation is grave. The Zarkali began without preamble. Despite our victories, the Harvesters continue to advance. They've adapted to our tactics, developed countermeasures against the beacon network. A murmur of concern rippled through the assembled aliens. Volkov stepped forward, her face set in stone. Then we need a new strategy. Dr. Voss, what have you learned from the latest beacon? Ilara took a deep breath, keenly aware of all eyes upon her. The beacon on Epsilon Eridani II revealed something unexpected. It's not just part of a warning system or a communication network. It's a key to something much bigger. She manipulated the holographic display, showing a complex network of energy signatures stretching across the galaxy. The beacons are nodes in a vast, ancient machine, a machine designed to reshape reality itself. The room erupted in a cacophony of alien voices and thoughts. Volkov raised a hand, silencing them. Reshape reality. What does that mean, exactly? It means, Zithera interjected, that we may have found a way to end this war once and for all. But the cost. The alien's mental voice trailed off, its multifaceted eyes dimming. Ilara nodded grimly. The energy required to activate the full network would be astronomical. It would require the sacrifice of an entire star system. The silence that followed was deafening. It was Volkov who finally broke it, her voice hard. And what would this reshaping do? In theory, Ilara explained, it would create a pocket universe, a reality separate from our own. We could use it to trap the Harvesters, cutting them off from our galaxy forever. Or trap ourselves, growled Kexeri, the reptilian commander of the Dracon fleet. How can we trust this alien technology? It could just as easily destroy us all. The room descended into argument once more, various factions arguing for and against the plan. Ilara watched, a sense of despair growing in her chest. They were fracturing, the alliance threatening to crumble just when unity was needed most. Suddenly, the ship rocked violently. Alarms blared as Lieutenant Patel's voice came over the intercom. Multiple Harvester fleets detected. They found us. The War Council scattered, each racing to their respective command posts. On the bridge, chaos reigned as the Voidbreaker and its allied ships scrambled to mount a defense. How did they find us? Volkov demanded, strapping into her command chair. Ilara's mind raced, putting the pieces together. The beacon network. They must have cracked our encryption, used our own research against us. The battle that followed was unlike anything they had faced before. Harvester ships poured from void space in endless waves, their tactics more coordinated and lethal than ever. The Allied fleet fought valiantly, but ship after ship fell to the onslaught. As the Voidbreaker shuddered under another barrage, Ilara made a decision. "Admiral," she said, her voice steady despite the chaos around her, "we need to activate the beacon network. It's our only chance." Volkov's eyes widened. The nearest inhabited system is light years away. We'd never reach it in time. We don't have to. Ilara's gaze was fixed on the swirling nebula visible through the view screen. That protostar, it's not fully formed, but it should have enough energy. Understanding dawned on Zithera's alien features. The Voidbreaker. We could use it to channel the star's energy into the beacon network and trap the Harvesters in the pocket universe. Ilara finished. But we'd be trapped too. Anyone inside the effect radius when it activates. Volkov's face hardened. We knew the risks when we started this mission. Lieutenant Patel, set a course for that nebula. All hands, prepare for emergency void jump. What followed was a desperate race against time. As the Allied fleet fought a losing battle against the Harvester Armada, the Voidbreaker plunged into the heart of the nebula. Stellar gases swirled around the ship, battering its already weakened hull. In the engine room, Ilara and Zithera worked feverishly to modify the void drive, pushing the technology far beyond its intended limits. The ship groaned and creaked around them, threatening to tear itself apart at any moment. "It's done," Ilara gasped, sweat beading on her forehead. "But someone needs to stay behind to activate it manually. The radiation, it's a one-way trip." Before anyone could respond, a new voice cut through the din. "I'll do it." Ilara turned to see Lieutenant Puddle standing in the doorway, his young face set with determination. "My family. The Harvesters took everything from me. Let me do this. Let me make it mean something." A lump formed in Ilara's throat as she nodded. "Ravi, thank you." As the rest of the crew evacuated to the escape pods, Ilara found herself on the bridge one last time. The view screen showed the Harvester fleet closing in, unaware of the trap about to be sprung. "It's time," Volkov said softly. "Ilara, it's been an honor." Ilara met the Admiral's gaze, seeing in it a reflection of her own mix of fear and resolve. "The honor has been mine, Katerina." As Ilara made her way to the last escape pod, she passed Patil at his station. Their eyes met for a brief moment. Volumes spoken in that silent exchange. Then she was gone, the pod launching into the swirling chaos of the nebula. From the tiny viewport, Ilara watched as the Voidbreaker, now little more than a speck against the vast canvas of space, began to glow with an otherworldly light. The protostar pulsed, its energy being siphoned into the ship and through it, into the ancient beacon network. A blinding flash lit up the nebula, and for a moment, Ilara felt that same vertigo she had experienced when they first activated a beacon. Reality itself seemed to bend and twist, the very fabric of space-time warping around them. And then, silence. As Ilara's pod drifted through the now empty space where the Harvester fleet had been, she felt a profound sense of loss and triumph. They had won, but at what cost? How many civilizations had been caught in the effect radius, trapped forever in a pocket universe with their greatest enemy? The communication system crackled to life, Zithera's mental voice tinged with awe and sorrow. It worked. The Harvesters, they're gone. But so is the Voidbreaker. So is Ravi. Ilara closed her eyes, a single tear sliding down her cheek. Lieutenant Ravi Patil, the young officer who had given everything to save not just humanity, but countless alien races, his sacrifice would not be forgotten. As the surviving ships of the Alliance regrouped, picking up escape pods and assessing the damage, Ilara knew that their journey was far from over. The Harvesters might be gone from this reality, but the scars they left behind would take generations to heal, and who knew what other threats lurked in the vast, unexplored reaches of the galaxy. But as she gazed out at the stars, Ilara felt a flicker of hope. They had faced impossible odds and emerged victorious. The Alliance, forged in the crucible of war, had held, and perhaps in time they would build something greater than any one race could achieve alone. The legacy of the Voidbreaker, of Ravi Patil, of all those who had sacrificed everything in this war, would live on, and Ilara vowed to ensure that their sacrifice was not in vain. As the rescue ships approached, Ilara squared her shoulders. There would be time for mourning later. Now, they had a galaxy to rebuild. Since the fateful day when the Voidbreaker vanished into the heart of a nebula, taking with it the Harvester threat and changing the face of the galaxy forever. Dr. Ilara Voss, now Ambassador Voss, stood before the great window in the Galactic Council chamber, her once dark hair now streaked with silver. The Earth that was hung in the sky, a gleaming blue marble that served as a reminder of how far they had come and what they had nearly lost. New Earth, as it was now called, had become the heart of a thriving interstellar civilization, a beacon of hope and cooperation in a universe still healing from the scars of war. Ambassador Voss, A young aide interrupted her reverie. "They're ready for you." Ilara nodded, smoothing down her formal robes as she made her way to the podium. The chamber was packed, filled with representatives from hundreds of worlds. Some faces were familiar: human, Zarkeli, and other races that had fought alongside them in the war. Others were new, species that had emerged from isolation in the years since, drawn by the promise of the alliance that had saved them all. As Ilara began to speak, her voice carried the weight of 2 decades of hard-won peace and progress. 20 years ago, we stood on the brink of annihilation. The harvesters threatened not just our worlds, but the very fabric of life in our galaxy. We faced a choice: stand alone and fall, or unite and fight. She paused, her eyes scanning the assembled delegates. We chose to fight, not just for our own survival, but for the right of all sentient beings to exist free from the shadow of extinction. The price was high. Countless lives lost, worlds scared, and for some, the sacrifice of their very reality. A murmur ran through the crowd at this. The loss of the star systems caught in the activation of the beacon network was still a point of controversy and mourning. But from that sacrifice came hope. The Voidbreaker and its brave crew, beings from a dozen worlds working as one, showed us what we could achieve together. Their legacy lives on in this council, in the bridges we've built between our peoples, in the technologies we've shared, and the challenges we've overcome together. Ilara's voice grew stronger, filled with passion and conviction. In the years since, we've faced new trials. The power vacuum left by the Harvester's departure led to conflicts as old rivalries resurfaced. We've weathered economic crises as trade routes realigned. We've grappled with the ethical implications of the technologies we've uncovered. She gestured to the holographic displays floating around the chamber, showcasing the marvels they'd achieved. Vast space habitats, terraformed worlds, ships that could cross the galaxy in the blink of an eye. But each time, we've remembered the lesson of the Voidbreaker. Unity is our strength. Diversity is our advantage. And in the face of adversity, the sentient beings of this galaxy are capable of incredible things. As Ilara spoke, her mind drifted to those who were no longer with them. Admiral Volkov, who had guided the fledgling alliance through its turbulent early years before succumbing to an assassin's bullet. Zithara, whose groundbreaking work on cross-species communication had revolutionized galactic diplomacy, now honored with a statue in the Council's Great Hall. And Ravi, young Lieutenant Potul, whose final act of courage had saved them all. His name was now synonymous with selflessness and heroism across 1,000 worlds. Today, Ilara continued, we face a new chapter in our shared history. The activation of the beacon network didn't just save us from the Harvesters. It opened doorways to realms beyond our comprehension. The beings we've encountered in the pocket universes created by the network challenge our very understanding of life and consciousness. Holographic images flickered to life, showcasing strange, ethereal creatures that defied conventional physics. Ilara remembered the first contact with these extra-dimensional beings, the mixture of awe and terror she had felt. It had taken years to establish even basic communication, but the potential benefits were staggering. As we stand poised to step into these new realms, to expand our understanding of the multiverse itself, we must remember the principles that brought us here: cooperation, compassion, curiosity, the willingness to see beyond our differences and recognize the fundamental connectedness of all sentient life. Ilara's voice softened, becoming almost reverent. The legacy of the Voidbreaker is not just in the victory it won us, or the technologies it helped us discover. It's in the idea that in our darkest hour, we can reach across the gulf of species and culture, join hands, and face the unknown together. She straightened, her eyes blazing with the same fire that had driven her all those years ago on Proxima Centauri V. Today, we vote on the Multiversal Exploration Initiative. This isn't just about scientific discovery or resource acquisition. It's about honoring those who sacrificed everything to give us this chance. It's about ensuring that the legacy of cooperation we've built continues to grow and flourish. Ilara's gaze swept across the chamber one final time. The choice before us echoed the one we faced 2 decades ago. Do we remain cautious, clinging to the safety of the known? Or do we honor the spirit of those who came before us and dare to reach beyond the boundaries of our own universe? As Ilara stepped back from the podium, the chamber erupted in discussion. Delegates from 100 worlds debated, argued, and eventually voted. Hours later, as the final tally was announced, Ilara stood once more at the great window. The initiative had passed, not unanimously, but with a clear majority. A new era of exploration and discovery lay before them. As she gazed out at the stars, a familiar presence joined her. Talik, a young Zarkeli scientist, had become something of a protege to Ilara over the years. They're calling it the Vostpadal Initiative, Talik said, its mental voice tinged with admiration. A fitting tribute, I think. Ilara smiled softly. Ravi would have loved this. He always said that the greatest adventure was yet to come. As they stood there, watching the bustle of ships coming and going from New Earth, Ilara felt a sense of completion. The journey that had begun with her discovery on a distant exoplanet had led here to the threshold of a new frontier that spanned realities. The legacy of the Void Breaker, of all those who had fought and sacrificed in the war against the Harvesters, lived on. It lived in the alliances they had forged, in the technologies they had developed, and in the spirit of cooperation that now guided their civilization. But more than that, it lived in the hearts and minds of trillions of beings across the galaxy, in their shared determination to face the unknown together, to reach beyond the boundaries of their own existence and touch the infinite. As the first ships of the multiversal exploration fleet began to depart, their void drives humming with power, Ilara felt a familiar thrill of excitement. The greatest adventure, indeed, was yet to come. And whatever lay beyond the veil of their reality, whatever wonders or terrors awaited them in the vast multiversal expanse, Ilara knew one thing for certain. They would face it together, united in the spirit of the Void Breaker and all those who had sacrificed to bring them to this moment. The legacy endured, and the future, vast and unknown, beckoned.